Hello and welcome to the Real-Esteem podcast. Today is November the 7th, 2018. I'm your host, Patrick Tabor. And today on the Marriage Edition, we're going to talk about idolatry. If you're accessing our podcast through any of our providers, Stitcher, iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or Spreaker, please subscribe so you can get a notification when we make new ones available. If you'd like to listen to any old podcasts or get a copy of our book, Real-Esteem, Finding Your Identity in Christ, please visit us at enith.com, EYNIITH.com. So why would I bring up idols during a marriage podcast? What do they have to do with one another? Well, actually, some of the issues that people have in their marriage are due to idols. Well, let's look at the definitions first. The definitions are worship of idols or extreme admiration, love, or reverence for something or someone. Now, I want to specify that we are not to idolize anything above God. That is the first rule. Your wife, your children, your possessions, your job, anything, you do not idolize that. Nothing above God. You have to put things in perspective and you have to put them in their rightful place. For instance, when you have children and you're married, you do not put your children over your spouse. It causes friction. Finances. You do not put the importance of money over the care and love and nurture of your spouse or your children. You do not put these things in a higher regard, because if you do, you're going to kind of forsake or damage the relationship that you have with the people, which really, as far as God's concerned, the most important thing is your people. Your people are your wife or your husband, your children, your friends, father, mother, brother and sister. Your relationships are more important than the things that you possess or the time you prefer to spend in some event. So you have to make sure that you put in the right perspective and you regard your spouse and your children and people in general as more important than your stuff. If you don't, you're going to break down relationships that you have with people. Why do I say this? Jonah 2:8 says, "Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love." So you're going to go ahead and cut the strings on the relationships or damage or hinder the relationships from growing because you desire these things or this or someone else for that matter more than you do the ones that are should be in a higher regard. For instance, with children, when couples end up having children, a lot of times your first year is kind of like, or maybe even your first 2 years, you delve into this not knowing what to do and learning as you go. It's on the job training. And it's very difficult. You're learning how to deal with 4 hours of sleep as opposed to your normal 8. And you have to realize that you have got to, give all of this time to this new little human being. And it takes a lot out of you. And that's a normal process. But after you get in a routine, you have to remember that you're married, that you should go on dates, that you still regard the time that you do get to spend with each other as valuable. There's no quick works here. You've got to really spend time with each other, listen to each other. You've got to do the same things you were doing when you're dating. And I know people are saying, well, when you have kids, that's hard to do. Well, when you're on your job and you have a project or something that's due, you do what you have to do to make that happen. It's the same in a relationship. You have to do what's necessary to make sure you spend time with your spouse and don't put the children above your spouse. Now, like I said, in the beginning, you have to spend a lot of time focusing on that child. But once you get into a routine or a habit and you've gotten an understanding of how to handle this, you can get into a semi-pattern of making sure you spend time with each other. It's important. because you still regard that person who helped you make that child as valuable. So you have to remember, you don't want to regard the child above the relationship you have with your spouse. If you do, you're going to end up eventually hurting the child. So I said all that to say Colossians 3:5 says, put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. We can take the material things that we have, the issues that we've that we may have, the different bad habits that occur that have been built into us. We can utilize those things and think that, oh, well, it's okay. Well, it's not hurting anybody. Well, truthfully, it's tearing up a relationship too, because your relationship with God is first and your spouse is second. So if you can learn how to remove the idolatry that you may have for a certain thing or a certain time or event, or it can be as simple as a TV show that you watch religiously and you don't want anybody else around when you do. You've got to really take time out to think, is this show more important, or this movie, or this football game, or this basketball game, or this soccer game? Is that more important than the relationship I have with my spouse or my children? You can record the show and watch it later if there's something pressing and more important at that moment. Always give precedence to people as opposed to just the things that you want to do. Now, I'm not saying you should never get to do what you would like to do. I'm just saying don't make it an idol. Make it so important that you disregard the people around you. And lastly, these two last scriptures are interesting. 1 John 5:21 says, little children, keep yourself from idols. And 1 Corinthians 10:14 says, therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. So God's telling us over and over throughout the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, that do not regard vain idols, whatever it is, whether it is a physical item, a material thing, or if it is an event, or if it's just something that takes your attention away from Him, so much so that you kind of worship that thing more than you do God, or you put more emphasis on something that is less important than people, especially the people who are closest to you. Those relationships can help you grow and become a better person. Those idols, or the thing you might be idolizing, will not. I hope you got something out of this today. Be blessed. Grace and peace.